That individual inspired millions of people, won 5 gold medals at the Olympics, and forever altered the sports landscape. What kind of life do you believe that individual would lead? Do you believe that the living will be luxurious, easy, and free? That couldn't be further from the truth for the female we're going to discuss. This film is about a slain slave who was forced to tell a falsehood for his nation while chained up, so pay great attention. You won't trust anything you see after watching this video, even if it might appear implausible at first. We show you what Nadia Comaneci affirmed, which is why we were aware of that the entire time. Nadia Comăneci was not merely the beauty queen of Romania. The best way to conceal it was with her. Her divine abilities were more than a passing fad in sports history. No greater fraud had ever been found. It was a chess move designed by a ruthless ruler who wanted something beautiful to conceal the evils occurring in his realm. He also identified the appropriate culprit. No one asked the lovely little girl how much it cost to get there, while everyone applauded her as she flipped across the balance beam with unparalleled poise and composure. Until now, nobody wanted to know. It may surprise you to learn that Nadia Comaneci was not born into affluence. She was born into a nightmare in Gheorgheni, Romania, in 1961. There weren't many jobs or liberties in this factory town. But even in those days, everyone recognized her uniqueness. She moved in an odd way. It seemed as though her body understood something before she did, for she was not only quick but also extremely accurate. Before she really realized what was happening, she was hired by Bela Karolyi. She had just turned 6. Her story was no longer hers after that, or perhaps it never was. At first, not even Nadia was aware that Bela was more than just a coach. He was already employed with Romania's secret police, the Securitate. The same government that bugged people's houses, monitored its own residents, and recruited friends to spy for it. Bela didn't know what type of hell she was getting herself into, but she still grinned. He would make her famous, they were promised. He claimed she would be fantastic. For a time, it appeared like he was correct. Without telling anyone how much she had sacrificed, she toiled every day for the following 9 years. She eventually took the stage in front of everyone in Montreal in 1976. She took full use of her opportunity to shine. No one had ever seen a 10 appear on the screen before. 0. The crowd erupted. However, they were unable to see the terror that motivated it. Nadia's inability to fall was the cause. They would be punished if they didn't succeed. For her coach, her town, her family, and herself. Errors were political when it came to Romania. This is the origin of the concept of perfection. She was adored by Time magazine, Sports Illustrated, and news articles in every language. She was regarded as a representation of obedience, innocence, and purity all around the world. But at home, things were different. They managed and watched her. She was not permitted to speak candidly with reporters. They read the letters she sent. Her phone was listened in on. She stopped being seen by people shortly after that. However, why? Because they weren't always there for her. She didn't trust many people, including her parents. Her teacher was the one person she could rely on. However, just when she needed him most, Bela, the man who had trained her since childhood, left for America without her. How did they treat one another? Nobody was able to respond, and Nadia remained silent. And then there were rumors so wild and terrifying that they frightened everyone. According to reports, Nadia attempted suicide by ingesting detergent in a desperate attempt to escape something more sinister than most people could imagine. The Romanian government denied it, claiming she suffered food poisoning. However, the scars were visible to those who knew her well. The silence spoke louder than any official statement since there was no chance in that nation. Nadia was no longer the nation's star during the beginning of the 1980s. She was an issue because she reminded people of a past that was too vivid, too well-liked, and too difficult to deal with. Her world shrank as Nicolae Ceausescu's hold over the nation grew stronger. They confiscated her passport. She found it difficult to move. She was now being held captive by her celebrity, which had formerly shielded her. Then something changed. A man appeared. In addition, he was wealthy and elderly. Many were unaware of Constantine Panat's identity, origins, or what he was. Suddenly, however, Nadia was spotted with him, being guarded, walked, and observed. And she vanished as swiftly as he came in the open. Not until 1989 did anyone realize she was gone. Still alive. Not confined. But managed to escape. Without being discovered, she crossed the border into Hungary at night after slinking out of Romania. Before arriving in Vienna, where she traveled to America, she had to wade through muck and dodge dogs. Panat, the man who aided her escape, was not who he claimed to be. Things become much odd at this point. Nadia was obviously worried as she stood by him in front of the Statue of Liberty when she eventually returned. No lady was freed in the entire planet. It recognized a lady as an owner. What actually took place? She accompanied him, but why? Why didn't Bela accompany him when he betrayed the nation years ago? What did she do in Romania during those years when her name was virtually forgotten? It is because Nadia Comaneci fled not just a nation but a part of herself that had never truly been hers. By the time Nadia returned to the West, her look, her body, and her heart were all different. The question that no one could answer, however, remained the same: why did she go with him? Why him? It was not Constantine Panat who saved the planet. He wasn't a hero. I wasn't even friends with that guy. He appeared to already know how things would end when he unexpectedly entered her life. He was an odd defector from Romania. He was harsh, older, and there were untrue stories about him that made individuals feel as though they were being forced to do things or even trafficked. However, when Nadia crossed the icy border into Hungary in the middle of the night, she didn't go to Bela. She didn't remain in a secure location. She headed directly for Panat. Nobody was able to determine why. She was in love, according to some. Some believed she was coerced. But since Panat didn't provide Nadia with love or security, the reality was worse than either tale. It was to the benefit. Under Ceausescu, escaping Romania was more complicated than just scaling a fence. It was about entirely letting go of yourself. Completing that required you to be a part of something even riskier than the pursuit. And Panat was that, the threat. Nadia wasn't free once they arrived in America. Under his supervision, she was transferred from motel to motel, always with guys whose identities she didn't know and whose intentions she didn't question. She refused to respond when members of the press tried to speak with her. When friends tried to reach her, they were unsuccessful. Romania was no longer her hiding place. Whatever it was she was fleeing from. Bela had coached her since childhood, but he had departed for the United States 8 years before her. He remained silent. Nothing. Not even when prompted. Since Bela had gone on to establish an empire, win a gold medal with the American women's gymnastics team, and become well known in his own right, he remained silent. TV cameras and sponsorship deals buried any shame he had, or didn't have, about Nadia. One problem, though, was that Nadia refused to go. Her name was still too huge. Her tale was too frightening. She left too much in her wake. And then the silence began to fade. She was eventually discovered by a reporter. She didn't appear like the girl who used to astonish everyone with her elegance and beauty. Instead, she was quiet and thin. When asked why she left Romania, she remained silent regarding Panat. There was no mention of Bela. It chilled everyone as she whispered, "I had nothing. Not even my body." When the genuine questions began to be asked, the fantasy broke for the first time. What did she constantly want to escape? Ceausescu, did you say that? Bela herself? Bela then raised his voice, changing the topic rather than defending himself. When pressed by reporters to describe Nadia's issues, he claimed that she was constantly experiencing them and was never stable. Then the man who had constructed her began dismantling her. However, those who knew her well were aware of what was happening. Nadia wasn't insane, no. She was shattered. She had nothing but performance-bandaged scars from years of silence, dread, and perfection. And since she was no longer acting, the pain had nowhere else to go. But something else was happening, too. Romania's government had been toppled. Ceausescu was executed. The Securitate disintegrated. A few files were released. Nadia's name was written all over those shredded boxes and yellow documents, along with names, dates, and surveillance logs. They had been monitoring her since she was 11, recording her cycles, bruises, and even her thoughts. She would be reprimanded, denied food, and subjected to corrective training if she failed to grin, it stated. She was pulled out of a gym in pictures because she refused to work out despite having an injured ankle. Even worse, Bela's conversations with officials were captured on tape. He offered other females in return for more government funding, threatened to kill her if she disobeyed him, and stated the terrifying words, "They will all fall in line eventually." Nadia was also included. Is he just another doll that was discarded and used by others to survive, or have you always been the villain, Bela? That question was never answered by Nadia. Her latter memoirs' passages about Bela were still ambiguous, lifeless, and oddly censored, as though they had been altered by someone else or, worse, as though she was still prohibited from speaking. The story might have been about more than Bela, Panate, or even Ceausescu. It might have been about the system, the machine, or the invisible chain that transformed young girls into symbols, then into captives, and then into ghosts. The final link in that chain, the final item that nearly killed her and the man who nearly took credit for saving her, will now be examined. You should know that most people have not forgotten about Nadia. The impossible became achievable because of her. She was an inspiration and a role model for millions of people worldwide. Nadia Comaneci was still admired worldwide in the 1990s, although she never received support or assistance in that country. Olympic sites continued to display her face. Even now, when people heard her name, they gasped. That was a prerequisite for her photo. However, what about the girl? She remained concealed by immigration attorneys and hotel drapes, moving silently about as though she was worried someone might notice her. Because she was not at liberty. Not quite yet. Not even close. After that, he appeared, the man who appeared to have saved her and turned became her rescuer. Bart Connor was his name. He was the ideal American dancer. He was the golden boy, blonde, and always joyful. He was safe, loved, and open, all things that Nadia was not. When he informed them that he had reconnected with her, the news articles naturally followed. A flawless performer assisting another person. Whether it was a tale of love, atonement, or gold medals, this joyful ending had to be genuine for everyone. But no one questioned him about how he found her. Since at the time, Nadia wasn't doing interviews. She had no intention of attending galas or strutting the red carpet. She was in the middle of being forgotten and being forgotten. Nevertheless, Bart reached her before she did. They gave her a new phone number, a plan, and a lodging once she was flown out. For the second time in her life, she was handed a screenplay and informed how her life would unfold. Like a corpse in water, she followed the river's current once more. People simply ate it up without wanting to know the truth. Bart was so pleasant. She didn't say anything. He responded on her behalf since it became too difficult for her. She had been bothered by silence for years, but now it was being used to promote a product. Gymnastics camps. Talks. Words of support. She rose to fame once more. Was she in charge, though, this time? Or was a different type of cage simply safer for her? Because anything seemed illogical. Every time she spoke, her smile was there, even though it never reached her eyes. She spoke slowly, steadily, and cautiously. She felt as though someone had reenacted her horror, but without the blood, the misery, or the rage. And what about the missing parts? They were never completed. The man who had brought her over, the man who she said, controlled every move I made, was all over Panate when she was harmed. A moment later, gone. No, investigate it. No fees apply. Silence reigned, as if someone had paid to have him leave. Someone may have. Because odd trends began to emerge in the years that followed. Those who attempted to write about her early years in America were not paid. Oddly, journalists investigating her escape were prohibited from speaking with her. What did they have to conceal? One individual even claimed that he received a call from a former Romanian official informing him that Nadia's truth is not for public use. Why wasn't it open to the public? On paper, in photos, and in every glossy sports magazine you could find, it appeared that Nadia and Bart were dating by this point. However, no one really noticed how it started. Not a request for a video. No opening narrative. In Romania, there was just a low-key wedding following years of oppression. There were applause as she arrived home, but no responses. People stayed up at night because of that. Despite everything that had happened to her, Nadia never appeared angry. Never sobbed in front of others. Didn't yell. Did not provide the complete story. Behind her eyes, however, something was shattered. Even her own book omitted the most agonizing aspects of her life. Indications of abuse were present. The Hunger Games were hinted at in the gym. But who are the true villains? No names were given to them. Why? What was it she wished to protect? Worse, who was still protecting them? Since Bela was never imprisoned. Not by Romania, please. Yes, but not by the Olympic Committee of the United States. No one. He received accolades, prizes, and an honorable retirement, despite the fact that an increasing number of American gymnasts came up with eerily similar allegations of mental abuse, food restriction, and punishment for imperfections. However, Bart remained at her side, smiling and talking all the time. But as he spoke, we heard less from her. She never added to what he said, argued with him, or corrected him. Everyone began to wonder if he had saved her. Or did he simply fill the silence that had been created around her by everyone else? Nadia never gave a detailed account of what transpired over the months that passed between Panate and Bart. And it may never be discovered. Whatever it was, it altered her. She had a fire that would not go out, not even under a regime, but it was extinguished. But it was amusing because as her words became quieter, her image became louder. Today's Nadia appeared on signs, in Olympic halls of fame, and at charity functions beside her attractive spouse. However, where was the previous Nadia from? The one who fled her homeland, put her life in danger, and vanished into a man's shadow? She had not been located yet. In this day and age, we are aware of how distressing it is to witness someone so blatantly being abused. What's shocking is that the abuse didn't extinguish the fire within her. And she broke one day. People said for years that the Nadia Comaneci we saw, the contented spouse, the Olympian, the well-groomed icon, wasn't actually her. That somewhere there was a more complex, darker reality concealed beneath the layers of planning, government control, and a carefully orchestrated press. In 2023, she eventually came out of hiding it. It was a silent admission of something that had been simmering in her heart for a while. There were no tearful interviews or viral news articles. A press release for a foreign news outlet was written in a few lines. A speech given at a private charity function. Not many people understood at first. However, those who did understood what it meant. Nadia eventually revealed to us that her journey from Romanian gymnasiums to American TV screens was never about freedom, even though we always believed it to be true. Not at all. Getting through was the goal. There is always a cost to living, regardless of how well-known you are, and that cost didn't go away when she went too far. She attested that the man who smuggled her out, Constantine Panate, had kept her hidden from others, deceived her, and eventually persuaded her to give up her silence in return for documents and protection. His partner wasn't her. She empowered him. The worst thing? Everyone was aware. During those years, she was approached by gymnastics agents, sponsors, and instructors, but they remained silent. When she entered, people were hungry, dressed loosely, and watched her closely because she was significant. She was known as the Golden Girl when a government fell because she could get people to purchase tickets, create news, and wave flags for Bart and anyone else who paid the highest price. Things start to go south at this point. Nadia never spoke negatively of Bart, despite the fact that he was his buyer. Not once. She even claims that he helped to stabilize her life. She added something else, something more nuanced. By the time Bart entered her life, she had learned how to smile when she didn't feel secure. What to do if someone asks a question and you don't want to respond. How to hide your own sense of direction while allowing a man to take the lead. Did she become a doll? Indeed. Was she really in love with Bart? Maybe. Was it freedom, though? Since her voice was silenced for decades, it's difficult to respond to that question. Through Romania. By Bela. Through public relations companies. By Bart. And lastly, by the history they wrote about her. Nadia remained silent as other gymnasts began to speak about being sexually assaulted, having their bodies humiliated, and experiencing decades of abuse while hiding behind gold medals. They are terrified of it, not because they don't believe it. The system depended on her silence to function. If she spoke, it would collapse. Not only the image. At last, she revealed everything to everyone. According to her, Bela was neither a hero nor a radiant knight. Although it was extremely vicious behavior that appeared to be regular behavior, she used to praise punishment. Physical suffering, psychological distress, and a young person lost in chilly gyms where hunger was a tool rather than a bad thing were all costs associated with winning the medals. When questioned why she hadn't revealed anything sooner, she replied, "Because no one would have believed me." Every gold prize she received was claimed by someone else. For each title she thought of, the story was written by someone else. Additionally, she was always told how loud she might be by others whenever she attempted to speak. So far, she isn't acting anymore. The heritage is now tarnished. We always had the impression that the world-shocking 14-year-old girl was more than just a dancer. She was imprisoned. That escape marked the start of a more serene and nuanced nightmare rather than its conclusion. And every smile we saw after 1989 was a means of concealing something, not a celebration. So what's left? It's just a woman who has survived it all. Before she learned how to operate the beam, she learned how to be quiet. Who, in her 60s, is at last constructing a new narrative about herself, not to erase the past, but to reclaim it. When she claims that beauty is unreal, we suddenly believe her. The true tale of Nadia Comaneci is not about getting a perfect score. She took a long time to come to terms with the fact that the number cost her a lot.